At one time we had talked about over to the left in this valley of having a replica of the Clotilda, which would be quite interesting to see what it was like to have 130 slots underneath a boat and to travel 3 to 4 months to get here. So that's kind of where we start here.
Like most cemeteries, it's quiet. But the last chapter of the transatlantic slave trade is buried here, in Africatown, Alabama.
This is the newest cemetery on the right, and we're going to go over to the old Africatown Cemetery. If you notice, we see family names: Lewis, Wilson, Coleman, Kidd. You'll see the headstones are faced this way, which is to the west. And then this is the old Africatown Cemetery here. And this cemetery was established in 1876 by none other than Cudjoe Lewis.
Cudjoe Lewis was a 15-year-old teenager when he was brought to America from his home in West Africa. He and more than 100 African men, women, and children were crammed into a schooner named the Clotilda, which carried them to Alabama. They were the last slaves brought to the United States after an Alabama man, Timothy Maher, lost a bet that he could sneak more slaves into America. It was 1860 when he set out to West Africa in search of Africans to bring to the U.S. to enslave. But transporting Africans for enslavement had been illegal since 1807. So to hide his crime, he burned the ship, and that was the last time it was seen. That is until reporter Ben Raines found the Clotilda in 2018. Ironically, that same year, a book was published about Cudjoe Lewis, but it had been written by the famous Harlem Renaissance writer Zora Neale Hurston in the late 1920s. But back then, nobody would publish Hurston's book. When she interviewed Lewis for the book, she filmed him.
Wake up, bullies, get on the rock. Think quiet, deep, it's 5 o'clock. Come on that cover, bullies. Come on up on that cover, unless you want some trouble with the walker. Come on. Wake up, Jacob. Day is a breaking. Get your whole cake of bacon and your shirt tail shaking. Wake up.
He told her how the Civil War started not long after they arrived, and once it ended, they were free. They wanted to go back home to Africa, but didn't have the money. So they decided to form their own town, Africatown. It thrived for years, but then things began to change.
When I came to Africatown, it was a very thriving community. They had whatever you needed. It was right here in the community. There were stores, grocery stores, there were barber shops, there were beauty shops, there were just whatever you needed. They had gas stations, everything was right here in Africatown. And that was in 1978. But as the years went past, and we started having a lot of health problems, and people began to move out, and all the businesses moved out. You can't buy anything in Africatown now. There's no kind of business here.
3 Mile Creek, which years ago, back in the 40s, the church members used to baptize themselves in. And period of time, the sludge and everything going through the Fremont Creek, it was just a disaster. The city dumped raw sewage in there.
They had some factories, paper mills, that was right across the highway over there. And when I first came here, some days you would get up and there would be so much, it looked like fog, but it was debris falling from the air. It was so thick you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. So a lot of families in Plateau, Africa Town have lost relatives. I mean, not just one relative in a family, but several members in a family have died from cancer, lung cancer. My husband just passed last year from lung cancer.
As the community started to decline, so did the cemetery where many of the enslaved were buried.
The brush was 6 feet tall. There were trees in here. You could not walk through here. You couldn't even go in.
Eric Finley's cousin Dora started the African American Heritage Trail, brought in students from William and Mary College to help research the old cemetery.
And they came in and borrowed heavy-duty equipment from the Eastern Shore, it's the next community over. And they came in here and they cut down all the brush, they cut down trees, and got this place to where you could walk through it. So then they went and found out how many graves was this cemetery designed for. Found out it was designed for 2,000.
Close to 1,800 graves were found, including that of Cudjoe Lewis.
But this is Old Plateau cemetery that was established by Cudjoe Lewis. He helped also establish this church across the street, which is Union Baptist Church. We're going to go over there. And Mobile County Training School, which is the oldest African American training school in the state of Alabama.
We had all black teachers which really cared about the students, and they could see things in you and what you might be capable of, and that's what they did. They tried to pull it out of you, and we thought we really had a very good school when we were coming up. My father was the second generation from the ship. I'm a third generation. He knew how to cook some of those things, and sometimes he would fix them. We didn't always like what they taste like because they, like one of the foods that his family used to have is what you call mush, and it was really just cornmeal cooked like you do grits and that sort of thing. And it didn't have it was bland, didn't have any good taste or anything, so I didn't really care for it. Everybody in this community, they may not know your first name as a child. If your family had 4 or 5 children, they may not have known your name, but they knew whose family you came from. And as you've always heard, that it takes a village to raise a child, that's what this was.
And come back to the village after they've grown up and moved, especially with the renewed focus on rebuilding since the Clotilda was found, and it serves now as the anchor.
It was a great childhood. I had a loving home. My mom instilled all the values in us to be successful. 6 of us are college graduates. The other 2 went to the military. So she did an awesome job.
Mark Jackson opened a restaurant and named it after Africa Town's founding father.
And so we always knew the history, the families, the great grandkids. We grew up together, and so I wanted to do something that was significant, and especially having it on Dolphin Street. And Dolphin Street, Mobile it's an old city. It's 316 years old, and this is the only black-owned and operated restaurant on Dolphin Street. So I wanted to do something that talks about our history to give us hope and to celebrate the rich history that we have.
His place has been in business for a few years, and it's a favorite.
It's all about us. It's all about the community. It's all about a sense of pride. What they talk about, black excellence. When you come in here, I knew I could bring people in with food or entertainment, but it was more so than that. It was all about, you know, to make us conscious and deliberate about our actions, to bring unity, to bring brotherhood, and to celebrate, you know, so many talents that we have. And so I thought, what better name, what better place to do it? And so that's why you see all the memorabilia and so forth on the walls, just remind us every day of how great we were, you know, what the sacrifices they made for us. My grandmother grew up in Plateau, Africa Town. My dad grew up in Plateau, Africa Town. And, you know, and we were raised in Plateau, in Africa Town. So, you know, so that's my life. You know, I was able to move away, and of course, like you guys, to college, and was gone 18 years, Ohio, Minneapolis, Houston, San Antonio, with my career in banking, and moved back home and wanted to just celebrate, you know, our rich history.
As he describes it, there's good Southern food on the menu and connecting people in the mission.
It was more so about, you know, doing something that I felt like we was missing. You know, to celebrate us, you know, to bring us together. All people from all walks of life, to bring us together. So when people are brought together, if you start talking to one another, you'll find out how much you like each other. Feel like how much you like each other, feel like how much you have in common. And then you can start networking. And then I knew power was going to come behind that. So it was all systematic, methodical, in how I wanted to approach and be deliberate about how, you know, what was going to transpire from these efforts. I didn't want to wake up at 60 years old and have regrets. And so I needed to do something to make a change. And so regardless of whatever the outcome would have become, it wasn't about that. It was about having that fulfillment and living life. I didn't want to regret not living life and giving myself a chance to do what I wanted to do. And so that's where I am now. And that's what made me, and that was the road in my journey. You know, each person has their own story. And so I don't try to dictate what their story and what the reasons why they may not have come back. But I can only speak of my journey.
He is a realist who's banking on a bright future for himself, where he grew up, and Black America.
It's hope. You know, it's family. It's communion. You know, we realize a lot of the battles, struggles that we have, you know, are systematically, you know, to oppress our people. But we still are striving. We still have the intestinal fortitude, the drive to succeed. And so you haven't seen our best yet. Our best is yet to come.
And Mae Jones agrees.
I think it's very important for them to know the history of this community, because it's a very historical community. Just think, that ship that came, the last ship that came from Africa, it landed, it docked in this community, and that's how the community was organized. The people got off the ship and came up the hill into Plateau. And I think that's Black history. That's Black history, and I think all Black people, period, needs to know about Africa Town.
I've been in the country, but I moved to town. I'm a Tolo shaker from my head on down. Oh, well, you may go, but this will